O eternal and almighty God, from whom all power and wisdom come, we are assembled here before thee to frame such laws as may tend to the welfare and prosperity of our province. Grant, O merciful God, we pray thee, that we may desire only that which is in accordance with thy will, that we may seek it with wisdom, and know it with certainty, and accomplish it perfectly, for the glory and honor of thy name, and for the welfare of all our people. Amen. Please be seated. I have a statement for the House. In light of the move to the Code Red level for the City of Winnipeg, I would like to advise the House and all members, and all Manitobans, of the steps taken by the Legislative Assembly to provide additional measures for health and safety during sittings of the Legislature. By agreement of the government and opposition House leaders and the member for River Heights, the seating capacity and number of MLAs permitted to be present in the chamber for legislative sittings is now reduced to 25%. This equates to the Speaker, 10 government MLAs, 5 official opposition MLAs, and 1 Liberal MLA, with no switching of seats by the Liberal members allowed. All other MLAs will be participating in the legislative sittings by virtual means. The seating plan continues to apply on a week-to-week basis so that caucuses can alternate the MLAs who are physically present in the chamber. In addition, the virtual component has been added to all 3 sections for the Committee of Supply for those MLAs who do not wish to be physically present to participate, and the previously agreed upon restriction of no more than 6 MLAs at a time in any one section continues to apply. This has been facilitated in a timely manner thanks to the excellent work of the virtual planning team and the head of Hansard Recording and staff from Media Services. The restriction of 6 in each section includes the chair, the minister, 1 government member, 2 official opposition members, and 1 independent Liberal, with the official opposition limited to 1 staff member in each of the 3 sections, and the Liberals limited to 1 staff person per caucus in the committee rooms. To clarify, the ministers and critics do not have to be physically present in the sections of the Committee of Supply. They have the choice to be physically present or to participate virtually. The supply chairpersons will be present in each section. We are living in unprecedented times, and the Legislative Assembly will continue to be responsive and provide options to ensure the health and safety of MLAs and Assembly political and non-political staff working in the Legislative Assembly. And I would just like to thank all of those who have worked very diligently over the past few days, and particularly also on the weekend, to reach these decisions which have been put in place for the protection of health for all. Thank you. Routine proceedings. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, second by the Minister of Education, that Bill number 48, the Fiscal Responsibility and Taxpayer Protection Amendment Act, be read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Finance, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Education, that Bill number 48, the Fiscal Responsibility and Taxpayer Protection Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to move Bill number 48, the Fiscal Responsibility and Taxpayer Protection Amendment Act, based on the language about our intent outlined in a recent throne speech. The bill will modify Manitoba's balanced budget plan to reflect the unprecedented fiscal challenges currently facing Manitobans as a result of the pandemic. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, second by the Minister of Health, that Bill number 49, the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Amendment Act, now be read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Finance, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Health, that Bill number 49, the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to move Bill number 49, the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Amendment Act. This legislation will modify or modernize the Manitoba's Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy regimen. As members will know, there is a requirement for a periodic review of the Act, and public consultations identified several recommendations to amend provisions of FIPA. Amendments will be more reflective of modern-day information processes and mediums and improve effectiveness of the administration of the Act.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Justice, that Bill number 54, the Personal Health Information Amendment Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Health, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Justice, that Bill number 54, the Personal Health Information Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, Bill 54 will amend the Personal Health Information Amendment Act. These amendments follow the 5-year mandated review of the Personal Health Information Act, or FHIA, which ensures that FHIA continues to meet the needs of Manitobans and the trustees for personal health information under FHIA. The proposed amendments are intended to achieve this goal. They are based on the feedback received in the review, as well as on the review of privacy legislation in other provinces.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, I move, seconded by the Minister of Crown Services, that Bill number 56, the Smoking and Vapor Products Control Amendment Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Health, seconded by the Honourable Minister for Crown Services, that Bill number 56, the Smoking and Vapor Products Control Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, Bill 56 will amend the Smoking and Vapor Products Control Act, which is a law of general application designed to address health issues and applies everywhere in the province. The amendments will seek to ensure that rules intended to protect Manitobans from second-hand smoke will apply uniformly throughout the province, while at the same time, of course, maintaining protections for the traditional or ceremonial use of tobacco.
The Honourable Minister, is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Families.
Madam Speaker, I move, seconded by the Minister of Education, that Bill number 47, the Early Learning and Childcare Act, Loi sur l'apprentissage et la garde des jeunes enfants, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Families, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Education, that Bill number 47, the Early Learning and Childcare Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Families.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to rise in the House today for first reading of Bill 47, the Early Learning and Childcare Act. COVID-19 has shown the need for greater support and improvements to Manitoba's childcare sector, particularly to benefit frontline workers and parents working non-standard hours. This bill will include provisions that reflect our government's throne speech commitment to create a modern childcare system and funding model that will enable the childcare sector to grow in line with demand from Manitoba families. Madam Speaker, our government has stood up for parents since the beginning of this unprecedented public health emergency, and I'm proud to say that Bill 47 will allow our childcare system to better meet the needs of parents and children throughout our province. Thank you.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister for Crown Services.
Speaker, I move, seconded by the Minister of Finance, that Bill 40, the Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries Corporation Amendment and Liquor, Gaming and Cannabis Control Amendment Act, be now read for first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Crown Services, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Finance, that Bill number 40, the Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries Corporation Amendment and Liquor, Gaming and Cannabis Control Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister for Crown Services.
Madam Speaker, Bill 40 will meet commitment by allowing a wider range of businesses to retail liquor, saving Manitobans money and assisting us in growing our economy. Currently, Section 34 liquor retail agreements are limited to businesses in rural areas, Madam Speaker. This amendment will provide the opportunity for private businesses anywhere in the province to expand the retailing options to satisfy customer demands and will help modernize our liquor retailing system. Madam Speaker, this initiative is one step towards our government's priority to reducing red tape for businesses and to provide more choice and convenience for customers. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Health, the Bill number 45, the Public Schools Amendment and Manitoba Teachers Society Amendment Act, be now read for a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Education, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Health, that Bill number 45, the Public Schools Amendment and Manitoba Teachers Society Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to do first reading of Bill number 45, the Public Schools Amendment and Manitoba Teachers Society Amendment Act. Manitoba is the only province in Canada where public teacher bargaining is done exclusively at the local level. There are presently 38 separate collective agreements bargained directly between school boards and their teachers' associations. This bill will modernize Manitoba's approach to public teacher bargaining by introducing a single-tier centralized teacher bargaining model. The bill maintains a local bargaining for the Division Scolaire Franco-Manitoba in respect of their unique management role of minority language school divisions. And the bill will not impact any collective agreements in place when the bill comes into force. And as existing collective agreements expire, school divisions and school associations will become party to the provincial agreement. The bill will modernize how teacher collective bargaining is conducted in Manitoba by streamlining the process and reducing duplication. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Families, Bill number 64, the Education Modernization Act, be now read for a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Education, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Families, that Bill number 64, the Education Modernization Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to do first reading of Bill number 64, the Education Modernization Act. The bill will make changes to various acts to modernize our education system in Manitoba and ensure the education system is focused on providing the best possible outcome for students in Manitoba. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Resource Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, second by the Minister of Municipal Relations, that Bill number 62, the Animal Diseases Amendment Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Resource Development, seconded by the Honourable Minister for Municipal Relations, that Bill number 62, the Animal Diseases Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Resource Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill will allow our farms and food processors to continue to produce world-class, safe and healthy foods in a humane way. The bill will amend the Animal Diseases Act to protect farmers from persons who interfere with food production facilities that could result in harm to people, animals, or the food supply, and to ensure that biosecurity is protected on the farm and through transportation and processing. Thank you.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Oh. Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister for Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Families, that Bill number 37, the Planning Amendment and City of Winnipeg Charter Amendment Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Municipal Relations, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Families, that Bill number 37, the Planning Amendment and City of Winnipeg Charter Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister for Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to introduce Bill 37 to amend the Planning Act, the City of Winnipeg Charter, and repeal the Capital Region Partnership Act to implement key recommendations in the Planning, Zoning and Permitting in Manitoba report. The bill will modernize planning processes, support a capital region economic growth plan, and ensure municipal governments make timely and transparent decisions on multiple private sector capital investment opportunities in their communities. This bill will help reduce duplication and unnecessary delays in planning to ensure Manitoba remains competitive and open for business and job growth. I am pleased to present this bill to the House for consideration.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister for Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Agriculture and Resource Development, that Bill number 53, the Municipal Statutes Amendment Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Municipal Relations, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Resource Development, that Bill number 53, the Municipal Statutes Amendment Act, be now read a first time. Act 2 be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to speak to Bill 53, the Municipal Statutes Amendment Act. This bill will modernize provisions in relation to public hearings and notices under the Municipal Act, the City of Winnipeg Charter, the Municipal Board Act, and the Planning Act. The bill will also enable small councils to effectively address violations of municipal codes of conduct through a majority vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister for Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Finance, that Bill number 55, the Reducing Red Tape and Improving Services Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Municipal Relations, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Finance, that Bill number 55, the Reducing Red Tape and Improving Services Act 2021, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill amends a number of statutes to remove unnecessary regulatory requirements and streamline provincial services that support Manitoba residents and organizations. The bill is part of our commitment to reduce the administrative burden on Manitobans and continue to grow our economy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development and Training.
I move, seconded by the Minister of Finance, that the Fair Restoration Practice and Regulated Professional Amendment Act now be read for a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Economic Development and Training, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Finance, that Bill number 41, the Fair Registration Practices in Regulated Professions Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development and Training.
Madam Speaker, this bill will update Manitoba's fairness legislation to reduce barriers for qualified international educated applicants to the 30 self-regulated professions. This will enable their credentials to be recognized faster, allowing them to start working on their professions, fill skill gaps in the labor market, and fully contribute to our economy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development and Training.
I move, seconded by the Minister of Finance, that Bill 61, the Apprentice and Certification Amendment Act, be now read for a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Economic Development and Training, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Finance, that Bill number 61, the Apprenticeship and Certification Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development and Training.
Madam Speaker, this bill will amend the Apprentice and Certification Act to support a more flexible and responsive apprentice and certification program. The changes respond to the 2018 Apprenticeship and Certification System Governance Review, which identified several transformations required to meet the current needs of industry. These modernizations support a more flexible, responsive, and apprenticeship and certification system, an important part of our efforts to sustain and grow Manitoba's economy through this pandemic era. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Health, that Bill number 42, the Remote Witnessing and Commissioning Act, various acts amended, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Justice, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Health, that Bill number 42, the Remote Witnessing and Commissioning Act, various acts amended, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill amends a number of statutes that provide for the witnessing or commissioning of certain legal documents under provincial statutes. We recognize that the ability of Manitobans to use video conferencing or similar technology in the future will be beneficial, for example, in creating a will or buying a home. This bill is certainly a step in the right direction, and I'm pleased to present it to the House for consideration.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Agriculture, that Bill number 46, the Court Practice and Administration Act, various acts amended, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Justice, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Resource Development, that Bill number 46, the Court Practice and Administration Act, various acts amended, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, this bill will respond to requests from the judiciary to improve a number of administrative and procedural processes within Manitoba's 3 courts. Modernizing and improving the justice system in Manitoba continues to be a priority for our government, and this bill is another step in that direction.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I move, seconded by the Minister of Education, that Bill number 50, the Legal Aid Manitoba Amendment Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Justice, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Education, that Bill number 50, the Legal Aid Manitoba Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, this bill updates provisions related to the tariff of fees paid to the private bar who administer services on behalf of Legal Aid Manitoba. The bill will provide Legal Aid Management Council the authority over the tariff, including the setting of fees. The amendments contained in this bill will allow Legal Aid Manitoba to be nimble in responding to access to justice issues and will provide them with an important tool to manage operations.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I moved, seconded by the Minister for Economic Development and Training, that Bill number 51, the Limitations Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Justice, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Economic Development and Training, that Bill number 51, the Limitations Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, limitations acts are important aspects of the civil justice system. They ensure parties do not delay unnecessarily in bringing lawsuits. This avoids problems with memories fading and key documents being lost. A new Limitations Act will give better certainty to parties, lawyers, and courts. Most other provinces have already modernized their corresponding acts, and Manitoba is now doing the same.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I move, seconded by the Minister of Finance, that Bill number 52, the Minor Amendments and Corrections Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Justice, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Finance, that Bill number 52, the Minor Amendments and Corrections Act 2021, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, this bill is a long-standing tradition in the Manitoba Legislative Assembly. The Minor Amendments and Correction Act shows our respect for the rule of law by correcting various typographical, numbering, and minor drafting and translation errors identified by Legislative Council. This bill also contains minor amendments that are brought forward to a variety of acts. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I move, seconded by the Minister of Finance, that Bill number 57, the Protection of Critical Infrastructure Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Justice, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Finance, that Bill number 57, the Protection of Critical Infrastructure Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
The main purpose of this bill is to protect critical infrastructure if and when a protest harms or threatens to harm the public interest of Manitobans. The legislation would create a provincial offence for undue obstruction of critical infrastructure, such as railways and highways. The legislation provides consequences that would prevent a resumption or reoccurrence of the obstructive behavior. The Manitoba government recognizes the rights of citizens to express views on issues and engage in peaceful protests. Those rights must be balanced with the rights of Manitobans to enjoy their property and pursue their livelihood and access necessary services. This bill will take firm action to prevent blockades from creating risks to public safety or harming the economy.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I move, seconded by the Minister of Education, that Bill number 58, the Criminal Property Forfeiture Amendment Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Justice, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Education, that Bill number 58, the Criminal Property Forfeiture Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, this bill amends the Criminal Property Forfeiture Act to significantly improve operational efficiency of the Criminal Property Forfeiture Branch. The amendments will also provide the Criminal Property Forfeiture Branch in the fight against organized crime and money laundering with the critical legal tools and authority to identify and secure unlawful money before it can become untraceable in the day and age of smartphone banking.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I move, seconded by the Minister of Families, that Bill number 59, the Police Services Amendment Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Justice, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Families, that Bill number 59, the Police Services Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
The Police Services Amendment Act will amend the Police Services Act to enhance transparency, oversight, and accountability in policing. The bill will provide clarity to police, address gaps in the current legislation, and strengthen the Independent Investigation Unit. This bill will ensure that Manitoba has the most effective independent police oversight agency in Canada. The bill is another example of our commitment to implementing meaningful reforms that will guide the future of policing and police oversight and governance here in Manitoba.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I move, seconded by the Minister of Crown Services, that Bill number 60, the Liquor, Gaming and Cannabis Control Amendment Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Justice, seconded by the Honourable Minister for Crown Services, that Bill number 60, the Liquor, Gaming and Cannabis Control Amendment Act 2, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill will amend the Liquor, Gaming and Cannabis Control Act to establish a new license category that would allow third-party companies to deliver liquor and cannabis on behalf of existing liquor retailers, service licensees, and retail cannabis stores. This bill also includes provisions that would strengthen the LGCA's enforcement capabilities, establishing authority to employ minors and young persons who would attempt to purchase regulated products in order to allow the LGCA to monitor licensees' compliance with prohibitions under age sales.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I move, seconded by the Minister of Agriculture, that Bill number 63, the Petty Trespasses Amendment and Occupiers Liability Amendment Act, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Justice, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Resource Development, that Bill number 63, the Petty Trespasses Amendment and Occupiers Liability Amendment Act, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The main purpose of this bill is to better protect rural Manitoba residents from crime by improving Manitoba's trespass and occupiers liability laws. The legislation will include amendments to the Petty Trespassers Act to ensure the law is easier to enforce and to prevent confrontations between landowners and trespassers. Amendments to the Occupiers Liability Act ensure a landowner's legal responsibility for injury is fair and reasonable when someone is on their property without permission. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. Committee reports, tabling of reports, ministerial statements, member statements. The Honourable Member for Dawson Trail.
Madam Speaker, I'm honored today to introduce a special couple and two Dawson Trail.
We could ask the Honourable Member for Dawson Trail. We can't hear him. I wonder if he has his headset there.
Okay, one sec. You might have to come back.
Okay, we'll come back. The Honourable Member for St. James.
Today I'd like to draw attention of the House to a silent driver of our growing affordability crisis, housing affordability crisis in Manitoba. During my first year as an MLA, our office learned of many apartment buildings in St. James that were impacted by above-guideline rent increases approved through the Residential Tenancies Board. Madam Speaker, all of these rent increases were 15% or higher. People on fixed incomes, many of them seniors, were being driven out of their buildings because they couldn't afford these types of rent increases without sacrificing other essentials like food and medicine. To learn more about the scope of the problem, we submitted a FIPA which found that in 2019, 310 applications for above-guideline increases were put forward, and every single application was approved. In 2019 alone, 20,400 units in Manitoba had been affected, and of those units, approximately 2,700 had seen rent increases of 20% or more. It's quite clear that our system of rent controls is broken and that it's failing to balance the interests of everyday Manitobans and those of property owners. While we need to ensure there are investment incentives for rental housing sector, our primary responsibility here should be to protect the overall affordability of life in our province, and at this, Madam Speaker, our government is currently failing. In light of the growing housing affordability crisis in Manitoba, and given the incredible economic challenges being faced by Manitobans, it's my belief that the government should immediately place a halt on approving above-guideline rent increases. The government should revisit the Residential Tenancies Board legislation to slow the pace of rent increases that will ensure rental housing remains affordable for seniors and people on fixed incomes in Manitoba.
I would now like to go back to Dawson Trail. The Honourable Member for Dawson Trail.
Madam Speaker, I'm honored today to introduce a special couple and two Dawson Trail heroes. Leo and Adele Dubois were long-standing residents of Lorette, Manitoba. Adele was active in the church while Leo was a town councillor, school trustee, Grand Knight with the Knights of Columbus, as well as a hockey and baseball coach. Leo worked as a grader operator in the town and would wave to everyone. Their family describes Leo and Adele as being good Samaritans. They saw the good in others and always had a place at their table. I'm told no one ever left their house without something to eat or drink. Adele passed in 2017, and her dying wish was that Leo would not get too lonely. The family honored her wish and made sure Leo was never lonely right up until he passed on Christmas morning in 2019. The grandchildren of Leo and Adele came up with an idea to honor their legacy by paying for a commemorative bench. On September 8th of this year, the commemorative bench was placed in front of La Parish of Notre Dame in Lorette to honor the lives of these 61-year residents. Please join me in honoring the memory of two wonderful Dawson Trail heroes, Leo and Adele Dubois.
The Honourable Member for Dauphin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. While Manitobans are dealing with a global pandemic, there are still many good news stories happening across our great province. Last week, this strong parkland community celebrated the unveiling of a new Zamboni, and I know this investment will serve the community and the surrounding region very well. Madam Speaker, I have a great privilege of representing the community of St. Rose de Lac in the Manitoba Legislature. St. Rose de Lac is in the central region of Dauphin constituent and of Manitoba. I know this community holds great ideas and experience that can help the province to recover and develop positively from the global COVID-19 pandemic. St. Rose de Lac is Manitoba's cattle capital, and I know the cattle producers in this region form a significant part of Manitoba's good news livestock story. Every year, Manitoba's cattle producers yield beef of the highest quality. They steward their livestock and the land with care. I want to thank the community, Mayor Robert Brunel and Council, and most importantly the livestock producers for their leadership. Their knowledge related to the beef industry is an invaluable resource. I also thank the producers who came to St. Rose this past summer to meet, discuss, and share ideas with Manitoba's Minister of Agriculture and Resource Development. I'd also like to thank my colleague, the Minister, for making St. Rose a stop on his summer farm tour. I thank the Palliser government and the Manitoba's health leaders for their strong leadership during this pandemic, and for the PC government's unprecedented offer to listen and help the entire Dauphin region with regional economic development planning. Madam Speaker, St. Rose has a lot to offer, and it's really, really great to hear they got a new Zamboni.
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Homelessness in Wolseley is a challenging issue that has only been exacerbated by the pandemic. People are camping on the properties of many businesses in the Wolseley constituency. Stores and restaurants are used as warming shelters, and washrooms are used for bathing and drug use. Small businesses incur the costs associated with cleaning up their property once folks move on. The folks camping behind businesses on the riverbank and in the parks of my constituency are human beings who deserve dignity, but are forced to use public spaces as toilets. There have been several recent fires in the constituency as a result of people trying to get warm, and last month, a community member died alone in a park where he was sheltering. His name was Tom. Recently, members of the West Broadway Business Association wrote to their representatives at all levels of government to discuss the burdens they are shouldering with respect to marginalized members of our community. The COVID-19 pandemic has escalated chronic issues. The added costs in order to operate safely mean that their thin margins are being stretched, yet they are left to cover the costs of homelessness as well. Businesses already struggling to survive are using all available resources to help their unhoused neighbors while keeping their staff and property safe, but these efforts don't provide long-term solutions. 75% of respondents to a Wolseley community survey indicated that public bathrooms are desperately needed in our constituency. Community serving agencies continue to call for adequate, secure, affordable housing, 24/7 safe spaces, and 24/7 mobile mental health crisis response teams. And now the Business Association joins that call. West Broadway business owners want to be part of the solution, but they can't do this alone. The provincial government must do its part with meaningful policy and action to mitigate poverty, homelessness, and addictions. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Selkirk.
Madam Speaker, I stand before the House today to recognize a very special individual known throughout the province and around the world as Doc Moose. Dr. Vince Creighton is best described as passionate, dedicated, and committed to moose and moose management in Manitoba and around the world. The son of a conservation officer, Vince pursued university degrees in both Ontario in Manitoba, obtaining a Bachelor's of Science, a Master's of Science, and a PhD. With these impressive academic credentials and extensive knowledge of wildlife, Vince Creighton began a career in wildlife management for the province of Manitoba in 1972. Regional wildlife biologist, provincial moose manager, habitat manager, section manager were just some of the many hats Vince wore in a 40-year career with the province of Manitoba. Vince had an intense passion for moose and spent the majority of his career focusing on studying and understanding moose biology, physiology, and habits. He became a world authority, the go-to man. Doc Moose led and participated in moose management research, conferences, and symposiums across Canada and internationally. Dr. Vince Creighton's achievements have been many. He was among the first wildlife managers in Manitoba to advocate for the co-management of moose between First Nations and the provincial government. Doc Moose has made many appearances on both the Discovery Channel and Animal Planet. He has been the recipient of numerous awards, including Distinguished Moose Biologist Award, the 2014 Conservation Award from the Manitoba chapter of the Wildlife Society. Vince was the first ever recipient of the honorary moose hunting license from the Manitoba Department of Agriculture and Resource Development. Madam Speaker, it is indeed a pleasure to honor Doc Moose, Dr. Vince Creighton, in our hallowed chamber today. Thank you.
Oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Madam Speaker, Manitobans have lost confidence in this Premier's ability to manage this pandemic. They've lost confidence in this Cabinet and this government's ability to manage the pandemic. Over the weekend, we saw a remarkable scene. More than 1,100 new COVID cases in our province. We saw 15 Manitobans lose their lives. And where was the government in all of this? Where was the Premier? Where was the Minister of Health? Nowhere to be found. As small business owners were standing up and demanding assistance so that they could make it through the month, where was the Premier? Nowhere to be found. It was a complete absence of leadership. Where was he, Madam Speaker? What was so important to the Premier this weekend that he didn't have time to talk about saving lives and saving livelihoods?
The Honourable First Minister.
On the job, Madam Speaker, I and my ministers have been focused on COVID, the members seeking partisan advantage at the expense of the focus we need in this province to work together, to work in good faith with one another, to respect our health care leaders, and to give encouragement to Manitobans at a time they need it. Madam Speaker, this is a difficult time for all Manitobans. The members shouldn't try to achieve some partisan political advantage at the expense of the unity that we need right now to fight COVID.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
Unity was there amongst everyone who showed up. Dr. Roussin, Lynette Siragusa, myself, and others. We all showed up on Friday and over the weekend to issue a strong message to Manitobans to come together at this time. But where was the Premier? Where was he? What was he doing this weekend that was so important that he couldn't reassure Manitobans, that he couldn't bring forward a plan to save small businesses even as new restrictions were being implemented with a laudable goal, but that we know will have an impact on their viability? 180 physicians signed a joint letter saying that this government's penny-pinching ways are going to cost us more in the long run. We need to see a real response. We need to see real investment in healthcare. We need to see real investments in order to preserve small businesses. When will we see a Premier in action?
The Honourable First Minister.
Madam Speaker, the member opposite stands on a weak platform. He can't even show up for court dates, Madam Speaker. So the fact of the matter is we are, as a government, working diligently every day to address the issues of COVID. The issues raised by the physicians, for example, 5 of them, all 5 are being addressed as we speak and have been being addressed for some time. We have a plan that was developed over months of work by healthcare leaders in respect of the issues that they raised as far as ICU space, which is there, which is available. And all the member can come up with is alarmist behavior and phony fear-mongering and calling in the National Guard. Press releases, press conference, that's fine, Madam Speaker. The member may be good at those things, but we're better at addressing the issues Manitobans want addressed, and they want a government that will address COVID, and they deserve an opposition that will too.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
What Manitobans want is leaders who will show up. And history will record that on our darkest day of the pandemic, the Premier failed to show up.
That's right.
Again, there are 7 points in the letter that the 180 physicians co-signed. 5 of them, the government is failing on miserably, and the 2 additional ones, they haven't even proffered any sort of response. Another top-of-mind consideration for Manitobans is, of course, the safety of our schools. It's remarkable that at this point in the school year, during the rest of the city of Winnipeg moving to the red condition, that this government is still sitting on $85 million in federal funds. Do they have a plan? No. Do they have teachers? Additional classroom spaces? No. All they have are dodges and phony lines. What is the harm in hiring more teachers?
The member's time has expired. The Honourable First Minister.
The NDP threw their previous leader under the bus. They'll probably throw this one under the bus too, because he has a tendency to throw everybody under the bus, Madam Speaker, so I don't take this personally. The member talks about inaction. The actions we've taken are additional large sites over just the last 2.5 weeks that have increased our testing capacity by 40%. Done. Additional evening testing sites, over 650 patients at the Dakota Health Centre already receiving testing as a consequence of that action. 10,000 Manitobans with an appointment booking system, with the average wait being less than 1 minute. Madam Speaker, those are the actions we've taken. While the member's trying to score partisan points, we're focused on COVID. He should do the same.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
No, Madam Speaker. No. If this government had been focused on COVID, those measures would have been implemented in the summertime. If this government had been focused on COVID, a safer back-to-school plan would have been announced prior to September 8th. If this government were focused on COVID, nurses wouldn't still be fighting for masks. Masks, Madam Speaker. 8 months into the pandemic, our frontline heroes are still begging a penny-pinching government for masks. No, scratch that. We're still begging this government to show up during Manitobans' time of need. How is it that this government could have exhausted 8 months without bringing forward a real plan to guarantee protective equipment for those frontline heroes who need it? And what does he say to those who have contracted COVID in our hospitals as a result of their failure?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, the member was vacationing all summer and cobwebs were forming on the door of his office. The Health Minister and I made over 100 appearances to the media to be accessible and transparent to the people of Manitoba. On every occasion, with every announcement, good or bad, the health leaders of our province led the way after consultation with Manitobans, and we introduced the idea. Madam Speaker, we're continuing not only to be available to get action, to achieve results for Manitobans. The member talks about why we didn't have additional testing sites in July. We had no COVID cases, Madam Speaker. That would have been idiocy. We're setting up additional testing sites and making them available to Manitobans as is needed now, because this is when the demand is occurring, not just in Manitoba, everywhere around the world. And everywhere around the world, Madam Speaker, people are avoiding trying to be selfish and achieve partisan advantage at the expense of the unity that needs to occur in their jurisdictions. I encourage the member to do that now.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
Well, I think maybe we've come a little bit closer to diagnosing the problem with the Premier. Apparently, he views preparing for the second wave of the pandemic as idiocy. when in fact every expert around the world was saying that we ought to use the summer to increase testing capacity, to increase contact tracing capacity, and to increase ICU bed capacity to prepare for the inevitable resurgence of this silent enemy. And yet, what was the Premier doing at that time? Well, he was hanging a mission accomplished banner from billboards across the province. Ready, set, grow. Doesn't sound too good to Manitoba businesses teetering on the edge, to those parents worried about students in class, or to our healthcare workers sitting on the edge. Will the Premier now admit that his summer ad campaign was a complete, utter mistake?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, the idiocy would be a member opposite who does so little research you can't even get the slogan right. Ready, safe, grow. And immediately promoting safety in workplaces, promoting safe habits, promoting people practicing physical distancing. All summer, Madam Speaker, while the case numbers were low, we were advocating for health measures that would protect Manitobans if they followed them, and they were. But, Madam Speaker, some of them aren't now. And so deterrents need to be brought into place. And this is what Dr. Tam has said federally. This is what Dr. Roussin is saying here. We're acting on that advice, Madam Speaker. Not the advice of Dr. Wabb. I'm sorry, not Dr. Wabb. It's not a doctor. I don't mean to say that. But, Madam Speaker, not the advice of someone who pretends to be a health expert and is not. That's the danger when the member stands up, makes things up, gets things wrong, and tries to scare people. What we're focused on doing is addressing COVID, Madam Speaker. That's what Manitobans want. That's what they get with this government.
Order, please. I would just encourage the member that inferring about idiocy across the way would probably not be something that is viewed to be very kind or parliamentary. So I would just urge all members in the use of those words to be very careful in what they are saying. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, 180 physicians and PhDs signed a letter condemning this government's approach, saying the fact that they're not willing to invest in public health, that they're not willing to invest in frontline health care, is the reason that the coronavirus pandemic is spiraling out of control. And they say again that the government's number one stated rationale that the penny-pinching ways will cause us more pain in the long run. But what has been completely absent, and remarkably notably absent, from a government that claims to be the friend of small business is any help whatsoever to help those small businesses impacted by this round of restrictions. We are calling on this government to bring forward $100 million in special direct financial assistance for business this month. Will the Premier stand in his place today and commit to bringing forward $100 million in direct grants for small businesses impacted by the restrictions for this coming month?
The Honourable First Minister.
We've already done that plus, Madam Speaker, over $160 million already, and the largest and most supportive programs for small business, bar none, in Canada are here in Manitoba.
That's right.
Madam Speaker, the member speaks about penny pinching. The fact of the matter is he was ready to spend money from the rainy day fund last Friday. He had all kinds of ideas on how to spend money from a rainy day fund. The NDP raided it in good times. No money at all there. If the NDP had been in power, wouldn't have had any money to invest. Instead, we've invested it. $648 million more this year in healthcare than the NDP ever invented. Don't sound like penny pinching to a common sense person in Manitoba. So the fact of the matter is, we are investing more, and we're continuing to invest more in focused ways to address the issues that Manitobans want addressed. And they want us to focus on COVID, not partisan gain.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Madam Speaker, there were 15 deaths over the past 4 days, and as of today, 6 of those deaths were at Maple's personal care home. That's after 23 deaths so far at Parkview Place. We've been asking for the government to step in and take over care of Parkview Place for nearly a month, but the minister refused, and instead he called those deaths unavoidable. We know that we need to stop the outbreaks in our PCHs. We need to make sure that every private for-profit home is taken over by this government. Will the minister make sure he does not fail any more seniors? Will he take over control of all Rivera personal care homes?
The Honourable Minister of Health, Seniors and Active Living.
The member would do wise to stop continuously misquoting me and using words out of context. It does nothing to bolster their credibility, which is suffering right now. Madam Speaker, I'm happy to provide this. Unless the member for St. John's would like to provide the answer.
No, it's her trick.
Okay. I would like to provide this update. I can indicate to everyone there's been no more cases in a 24-hour period, that 28 workers have been hired at Parkview Place. There are now virtual visits happening daily. There are physicians on site or virtual 24 hours of the day. There was a town hall meeting for all the families of individuals and residents there, and all of the cohorted people who have been cohorted are done so in private rooms. These are some of the updates that show the degree to which this is a focus to keep health and safety at Parkview Place.
The Honourable Member for Union Station on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, we know that families are desperate to know how their loved ones are doing in personal care homes. They're worried sick about their mothers and fathers and elders in Parkview, Maples, and other PCHs across the province. They need to know that those in personal care homes are being cared for, and also that there are in-person inspections being done by health experts, and they need to know that today. The only way that we can know what's really going on in PCHs is for the government, rather, to step in and inspect each and every one. Will the minister take that action? Will he tell the House that every single Rivera personal care home in the province will have in-person inspections, today?
The Honourable Minister of Health, Seniors and Active Living.
Madam Speaker, let the member be very clear what they are asking for. If they are asking for in-person people to show up with clipboards in hand, even at the express direction of public health, that should not happen, let them say so. Manitobans know that we are standing up for them and keeping their focus on safety. Madam Speaker, I can tell all Manitobans that there will be more inspections undertaken even during this COVID pandemic than ever before, more than last year. And I can also inform all members that there was an unannounced follow-up visit even at Parkview Place that took place just 4 days ago.
You're here.
The Honourable Member for Union Station on a final supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Premier has said that he is comfortable with the actions taken at Parkview Place. 23 residents have died. Over 100 residents and staff infected. That is an absolute failure. We need immediate, decisive, and emergency action to save lives. That's why we've been calling for the takeover of Parkview, Maples, and other personal care homes, because the Premier's actions have failed. The Premier needs to stop being comfortable and take action to save lives of Manitobans. Will the Premier get on Team Manitoba and treat this situation for the emergency that it is?
The Honourable Minister of Health, Seniors and Active Living.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For the record, the member just also twisted again the words of the Premier on the record. Everyone is tremendously devastated at the loss of life that has taken place in Manitoba at long-term care homes. That's why we are acting. That's why so much is being done to keep those residents safe. I would say to all members of the Legislature, when it comes to the Maples situation, we know that in that facility all the rooms are private. We know that everyone has been in their rooms, monitored, kept safe as a result of the precautions that have been taken and the precautions that will continue to take place in all of our long-term care homes, because we care and because we put the first emphasis on the safety of all Manitobans.
You're here.
The Honourable Member for Concordia.
Madam Speaker, this is a stressful time for families and for our teachers who are supporting our children. Teachers have begun to speak out, saying they're exhausted and saying that they are, quote, at the end of their rope. There's simply no relief from this government. The Premier confirmed today that none of the $85.4 million in federal funding has made its way to school divisions. And over the weekend, MTS confirmed that federal money hasn't flowed. Funds are collecting dust. In other provinces, the money has started to flow, but not here. I asked the minister, when will the federal funds actually begin to flow, and when will schools begin to get the resources they need?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I have no doubt that this is a challenging time for teachers, for EAs, for bus drivers, for janitorial staff, for everybody who is working within the school system, Madam Speaker. It is a challenging time generally for society and many different people who are taking on different roles that they never would have expected a year ago, Madam Speaker. But I say to all of those who are working in the education system, and it was echoed by Dr. Rusin last week, that the reason why schools are seeing relatively minimal transmission of the virus is because those individuals are doing an extraordinary job in an extraordinarily difficult time, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Concordia on a supplementary question.
Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, it's clear that this minister's priority continues to be only their bottom line and not our schools. This spring, for instance, he forced the layoff of nearly 8,000 people in our schools, and now he's forcing out remote learning staff who work in the Department of Education. As we've said for months now, the province needs a resource plan. Instead, what families are facing from the Pallister government is their true priority. First and foremost, above all else, to try to limit how much they spend. Why is the minister forcing out staff in the Department of Education? When will federal funding actually flow to our schools?
That's right.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Unfortunately, the member opposite, while I recognize that he's trying to make a point about the great work that has been done in our schools by school staff, and that is certainly true, is conflating that with misinformation when it comes to funding. We did say prior to the beginning of school that there would be $100 million available. I got the most recent report from September. $15.5 million of that $100 million was spent by schools, $5.7 million on enhanced cleaning supplies, $1.4 million on transportation, $3.5 million on technology, and another $3.5 million on staff. Of course, there'll be another report in October, and I expect similar numbers during that month, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Concordia on a final supplementary.
And yet this minister continues to force out staff in his own department and hold back from schools when they need it most. Teachers and education staff aren't getting what they need to be safe. One teacher told the media a similar story that we have heard continuing on in other places. Once a positive test happens, a school has to wait for the positive test to be communicated to the school by public health. But they are waiting days, Madam Speaker, sometimes many days for those results to come in. This undermines the contact tracing as well as the confidence that parents would have to be quickly informed. Parents have begun sharing their own information because of this minister's step back. Why is it taking so long to communicate those test results to the parents and the schools that need it most?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, while I know the member opposite is critical of public health officials all the time, as are all the members on the other side, as indicated in the first answer, there's been $15.5 million in September alone of the money that was allocated spent within schools, Madam Speaker. I know that October will be similar numbers, and I'll be happy to share those numbers with the House when I receive them, Madam Speaker. The federal government has indicated that of the money that they have committed to, half will not arrive in Manitoba until at least next year, Madam Speaker. At some point during next year, for that money that they will flow this year, we absolutely will be spending that on similar items that I've already described, Madam Speaker, and others, including staff, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for St. John's.
Madam Speaker, Manitobans either living or working in correctional facilities or in the midst of a COVID-19 outbreak. Housed in Headingley, one Manitoban describes it as, and I quote, a complete outbreak, where an entire unit has tested positive, Madam Speaker. This same citizen also states, and I quote, people who are sick aren't coming forward because they are afraid of being put in segregation, Madam Speaker. That is what the Minister of Justice is offering Manitobans, segregation, when they are sick and most at risk and need. I ask the Minister, what is he doing to address this crisis at Headingley and other correctional facilities across Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I do appreciate the opportunity to respond to this because we have been working with our public health folks since day one of the pandemic here in Manitoba. We have very strict protocols and policies in place to deal with the outbreaks that we've encountered over the last month. So a lot of safety equipment is being utilized. We've upgraded the PPE to a medical status, medical grade equipment. We continue with the cleaning. In fact, Manitoba leads the country in terms of the capacity to clean these facilities. So there's been a lot of work. We will continue to work with our staff and the inmates at our various facilities to make sure that public safety is paramount.
The honourable member for St. John's on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, and despite what the minister has just erroneously put on the record, there are outbreaks at Agassiz, the Manitoba Youth Centre, Women's Correctional Facility, Brandon, Milner Ridge, and the Winnipeg Remand. Madam Speaker, one resident says that people who are sick aren't coming forward for fear of segregation, Madam Speaker. This is going to make it nearly impossible to contain the virus if the chain of transmission is not broken, Madam Speaker. The residents and many people are proposing that all residents and staff be tested at all of our correctional facilities. Will the minister do this and ensure that everyone at correctional facilities get tested today?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Obviously, we're working closely with our public health officials, Dr. Atwell and his team working in corrections. We're following their advice. I will say for the members' knowledge, we have done over 850 tests at our facilities. Obviously, those are symptomatic. We'll be offered a test and hopefully they will take us up on that test. I will say, obviously, we've enhanced the personal protection products there. We've enhanced our cleaning, and any individuals that do come down with a positive are isolated. Those cohorts are isolated, so it doesn't necessarily mean segregation, but certainly those that test positive are isolated from those non-positive.
The honourable member for St. John's on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, last week the minister said that there were about 1,900 Manitobans currently being housed in our correctional facilities. The minister just said that only 850 of those have been tested. Madam Speaker, I remind everybody these are contained, isolated, overcrowded, above capacity facilities that are ripe for the transmission of COVID-19. There simply isn't enough space in many facilities to isolate sick residents without double bunking in other parts of facilities or putting them in segregation. Madam Speaker, this is a recipe for disaster. And I remind the minister that everybody deserves to be safe regardless of where they are currently housed. I ask the minister, what is he going to do today to mitigate the transmission of COVID in all of our correctional facilities?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Since day one, we've worked very closely with our public health officials, Dr. Atwell and his team. We've developed policies, procedures for situations exactly as we find ourselves in. We're taking their advice. We're acting on their advice. Obviously, individuals, if they are symptomatic, are offered tests. And we've, as I say, we've done over 850 tests to date. And certainly we will continue to make sure that safety is first and foremost when it comes to both our staff and the inmates as well.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We continue to hear of climbing case numbers at the kiosk site. The government has the opportunity right now to get on top of this outbreak fast to try and control it, to make sure we do everything possible to keep employees and neighbouring communities safe. Unfortunately, the Premier has made it pretty clear to Manitobans this morning that no new actions or initiatives will be taken to help people get through this difficult time financially. Given this, the Minister and his government, at the very least, take aggressive action to contain and control the outbreak? Will they increase the kiosk site to code red immediately?
The Honourable Minister of Crown Services.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And again, protecting the safety and well-being of our staff and the communities surrounding the kiosk site, Madam Speaker, is priority one for this government. And I might add Manitoba Hydro as well and their executive team working hard with stakeholders, Madam Speaker, to ensure that proper protocols are in place to protect Manitobans in the north.
The Honourable Member for St. James on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If people in neighbouring First Nations get sick, those individuals will have to come to Winnipeg, where we're already reaching capacity because of this government's cuts to health care. Fox Lake Cree Nation, Tatascawea Cree Nation, War Lake, and York Factory First Nations are all demanding the government step up and do their part and protect Northern Manitobans. We can't afford another outbreak that will further strain our system. Will the Minister move the kiosk site to red today?
The Honourable Minister for Crown Services.
Well, thank you again, Madam Speaker. And Manitoba Hydro has been working closely again with senior health officials, Madam Speaker, because we'll take lessons from health officials and not the members opposite, Madam Speaker, who are providing direction and guidance on measures undertaken at kiosk, Madam Speaker. And again, working in partnership with KCN and other First Nations around kiosk and employees that live and work in that area, Madam Speaker. Our government is working hard with Manitoba Hydro and all stakeholders to ensure safety is number one.
The Honourable Member for St. James on a final supplementary.
You know, Madam Speaker, in his comments to media today, the Premier recognized that all Manitobans are taking a financial hit. So I find it quite fascinating that his special way of lightening the load for Manitobans is to give them a 2.9% rate hike just in time for the holidays. Not only does this rate hike mean higher bills for individuals, but it also means higher hydro bills for businesses when the Premier just affirmed this morning that they wouldn't be receiving any new supports either. That's not leadership. That's providing greater hardship for Manitoban families and businesses that have already received no help from this government. Will the Minister do the right thing and amend BITSA and strike the rate increase to help Manitobans and small businesses during this difficult time?
The Honourable First Minister.
Madam Speaker, the NDP created hydro havoc for ratepayers with $10 billion of wasted investment. They own any rate increases that occur in this province for decades to come. As far as our investments in small business, they lead the country. Madam Speaker, we have 10,000 small businesses in this province that have received gap funding, which exceeds every other province's supports. We have 10,000 businesses that have used our wage subsidy program, tens of millions of dollars going out every week now, Madam Speaker, to Manitoba small businesses. The member says we're not supporting small business, Madam Speaker. He puts false information on the record because he simply doesn't understand the reality of the situation. We're supporting Manitoba small businesses better than any other provincial government in Canada.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I table an open letter by a nurse who's been working at the Victoria Hospital. No one told the Vic that a patient who was coming from St. Boniface from a suspected COVID ward, the patient wandered the halls, and when people put on masks, they were mocked. Nurses there don't have adequate PPE. Now, the government knew about problems at the Vic because I wrote a letter to the Minister, which I also table, about the father of Dr. Jen Gunter. Mr. Gunter died there after developing sores, not being fed. No one returned Jen Gunter's calls for help, and the Vic admitted there were mistakes in his care, then cancelled the meeting with the family. So before the pandemic, we already had catastrophic failures in basic care and basic communication for a patient. In July, the minister knew about it. Why is the Premier blaming Manitobans when he can't even make sure that nurses in hospitals get PPE in a code red?
The Honourable First Minister.
The NDP opposition, Madam Speaker, was intelligent enough and thoughtful enough on this rare occasion to stand with the government last week and support a call for the federal government to resume its rightful responsibilities in funding health care in this country.
Hear, hear.
Every premier of every political stripe agrees, and virtually every opposition party across the country from coast to coast to coast, except the Liberals in this province, who sat quietly on their hands and represented Ottawa to Manitobans yet again. And they continue to do it, and they do it again today. While we stand up for Manitobans and for Manitoba health care, the members should do the same.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Clear that the Premier didn't hear my remarks. I'd be more than happy to share with him my opinion on that resolution last week. Earlier this month, in the middle of a code orange, I got a fundraising letter from my son's school, which I tabled.
Order.
Asking me and other parents to sell chocolate bars in order to raise money for distance learning equipment, a hand washing station, and 40 face masks. Now, apparently this was a miscommunication. We shouldn't be surprised about the confusion, because the Premier and his ministers have never explained how $85.4 million in federal money to make safe schools will be sent. Many other provinces break it down in detail. My question, would the Premier like to buy some chocolate bars, or will he actually spend some of the $85.4 million he got from the federal government to make my child and the schools across Manitoba safe?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, first of all, I noticed that the member opposite was tweeting erroneous information and scaring individuals within a certain school on the weekend, Madam Speaker, and I think that's unfortunate that this member, of course, puts politics ahead of both the safety but also, I think, the overall mental health of those who are dealing in a very difficult time. More specifically, when it comes to Ottawa, Madam Speaker, he will know that less than 3% of the funding that we ever receive when it comes to education would come from the federal government. This is a government that has stepped up with $100 million of funding. We continue to provide support to the schools as they need them. He can yell from his chair all that he wants, Madam Speaker, but it doesn't change the facts that we're here to represent Manitoba. He represents Ottawa to Manitoba, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Madam
The Honourable
Speaker.
Member for Tyndall Park.
I have a constituent. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a constituent who is a single mother of 3. She has a strong work ethic and wants to continue working. However, because of the shortage in child care spots due to the pandemic, she is forced to choose between cutting back on her work hours, which would make her ineligible for child care subsidies, or having to cut her hours completely so she can stay at home with her children, where she would then be ineligible to pay for or to apply for COVID relief programs. How would the minister recommend she move forward, and what is this government doing to address this for all other Manitobans facing the same situation?
The Honourable Minister of Families.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank the member for that very important question. I think it's important that what we did is we took it very seriously in terms of matching people who needed child care services with those facilities. There is an online matching system right now, so I would suggest that individual, you either contact our office. We'd be happy to set her up with the appropriate mechanism to do so. We do know that there's about 6,000 vacant positions right now in the province of Manitoba for childcare, so we should be able to accommodate those that individual.
The Honourable Member for Dauphin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Safe and respectful workplaces are important for all Manitobans, and this government has taken many steps to ensure that all employees are protected from all forms of bullying and harassment. The most recent step to ensure that all Manitobans are protected was the passing of the Municipal Amendment Act and the Council Members' Code of Conduct Regulation. Can the Minister of Municipal Relations provide the House an update on the Codes of Conduct for Municipal Government?
The Honourable Minister for Municipal Relations.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for that great question. We all deserve to work in a workplace that is free of sexual harassment and where individuality and diversity is respected, and municipal councils are no different. The Council Members' Code of Conduct Regulation, which officially came into force yesterday, is yet another tool to ensure that this does occur in municipalities. The framework will help council members understand both the expectations of them and situations or behaviour that can be considered inappropriate or unacceptable. Together, the Municipal Amendment Act and this regulation reflect Manitoba's continued commitment to preventing and addressing issues of sexual harassment and ensuring that we all have safe workplaces in Manitoba.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry. The Honourable Member for Fort Garry. I would ask the member to unmute his mic. The Honourable Member for Fort Garry. We cannot hear the member.
Finally making some sense.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes. The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
From the start of the pandemic, many businesses have led the way in measures to reduce the spread of COVID-19, from shutting down before they are mandated to reducing their occupancy in their stores. Sadly, we haven't seen the same leadership from the Pallister government to help make sure businesses survive through COVID-19. And many won't make it through the second round of shutdowns. With new restrictions should come targeted, corresponding financial relief for small businesses. Will the minister show leadership during this second wave and provide businesses with the financial relief they need immediately?
The Honourable First Minister.
After years, Madam Speaker, of NDP looting small businesses, raising their taxes, increasing their fees and charges, and blaming them basically for being in operation, this government came in and took immediate steps to assist small business, and we continue to do that during this COVID pandemic. We have over $91 million right now out in supports to Manitoba small businesses with our wage subsidy program, Madam Speaker, for example, that's assisted people in getting jobs back, helped small businesses with the cash flow crunch during this difficult time. And those applications continue to flow in. 1,696 new jobs created in just the last 30 days, Madam Speaker. On the GAP program, we alone in Manitoba have a $6,000 support program, 95% approval, money out in 48 hours or less, and Manitoba small businesses appreciate that very much. I can tell you, Madam Speaker, just in the last 7 days, another 100 Manitoba small businesses benefited from that. $160 million out to Manitoba small businesses, best record in the country. We continue to support our small businesses.
The time for oral questions has expired, and I have a ruling for the House. On March 11, 2020, the Honourable Member for Fort Garry rose in the House, alleging a matter of privilege on the grounds that cuts to the public service made by the provincial government led to the removal of public accountability, and those actions have impeded the member's ability to hold this government to account and interfered with his parliamentary duties. The member concluded his comments by moving, and I quote, that this matter be moved to an all-party committee for consideration, end quote. The Honourable Member for River Heights also offered advice to the Chair. I then took the matter under advisement in order to consult the procedural authorities. I thank all Honourable Members for their contributions to the matter of privilege. In raising privilege, members must satisfy two conditions in order for the matter to be ruled in order as a prima facie case. It needs to be demonstrated that the issue was raised at the earliest opportunity and that sufficient evidence has been provided to demonstrate that the privileges of the House have been breached in order for the matter to be put to the House. The Honourable Member for Fort Garry suggested that the criteria for determining the earliest opportunity should be interpreted in a, and I quote, holistic or contextual manner, end quote. And, I quote, cannot simply mean the next moment in time in which a member has ability to speak, end quote. The procedural authorities disagree with the member's contention. Bosque and Gagnon advise on page 145 of third edition of the House of Commons Procedure and Practice Act, and I quote, the matter of privilege to be raised in the House must have recently occurred and must call for the immediate action of the House, end quote. Therefore, the member must satisfy the Speaker that the matter is being brought to the House as soon as practicable after becoming aware of the situation. I ask members to keep this in mind when assessing the aspect of timeliness in the future, as I am not satisfied the condition was met in this case. Regarding the second issue of whether a prima facie case was demonstrated, the member essentially alleged that administrative or policy decisions made by the provincial government in regards to the funding of the public service were grounds for a matter of privilege. I would note for the House that Joseph Mangot advises on page 224 of the second edition of Parliamentary Privilege in Canada that allegations of misjudgment or mismanagement or maladministration on the part of a minister in the performance of their ministerial duties does not come within the purview of parliamentary privilege. This finding is supported by one ruling from Speaker Rocan in 1994, 3 rulings from Speaker Daquet in 1996, and one by Speaker Hicks in 2006. The principle is also confirmed by a decision of Speaker Lucien Lamoureux regarding a matter of privilege raised in the Canadian House of Commons on March 9, 1972. The matter alleged inadequate funding by the government of the Office of the Federal Auditor General. The allegation stated the lack of funding had an impact on staff and resources for that office, created delays in submitting a report, which in turn affected the privileges of members by impeding them in the discharge of their duties. Speaker Lamoureux ruled that there was no prima facie case of privilege, as the complaint about the facilities of the Auditor General's office did not relate to privilege, but rather to a matter of administration. Speaker Lamoureux stated in the ruling, and I quote, I remind honourable members that this is not a decision on the substance of the matter, but one only on procedure, which is the limit of Speaker's responsibility in such matters, end quote. He also indicated that the matter could be raised under different circumstances on another occasion. The member for Fort Garry alleged that the cuts to public service impeded his ability to hold the government to account. However, given that members have been able to ask questions during oral questions, make member statements, and participate in debate and in committee meetings, it is difficult to argue with the suggestion that the member was impeded from It is difficult to agree with the suggestion that the member was impeded from performing his parliamentary duty. In regards to the member's comments that he could not fulfill his role as critic to hold the government to account, Mangot further advises on page 224 of the same edition that, and I quote, parliamentary privilege is concerned with the special rights of members, not in their capacity as ministers or as party leaders, whips, or parliamentary secretaries, but strictly in their capacity as members in their parliamentary work, end quote. Therefore, the honourable member from Fort Garry cannot claim the protection of parliamentary privilege for the performance of his duties as a critic, but only as an MLA. All of the above references from Joseph Mangot are supported by rulings from myself, as well as from Speakers Rocan, Daquet, and Hicks. The member has not demonstrated any obstruction or impediment regarding the function of the House nor the discharge of his duty. I must therefore rule with the greatest respect that the matter raised does not fulfill the criteria of a prima facie case of privilege. This does, however, does not prevent the member from raising the issue in other areas, such as questions in the House or during discussions held by the Public Accounts Committee or other such decision-making bodies for the Legislative Assembly. The Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
On a matter of privilege.
On a matter of privilege.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. I rise at the earliest opportunity as I have used the time to consult authorities, and it is not permitted to raise matters of privilege during question period according to our rules, Madam Speaker. We know that it is the job of MLAs to be able to comment on legislation before this House, Madam Speaker. This legislation must be made available to members so that they can do their job, Madam Speaker. The fundamental privilege of a member is speech in this chamber. And if the information necessary to provide the basis of this speech is deliberately withheld from members of this chamber, this fundamentally undermines the ability of MLAs to do their job. In plain English, Madam Speaker, this is a cheap and worrisome move that undermines the fundamental democratic rights of members of this chamber. Beginning at 1:30 p.m., Madam Speaker, the government introduced 23 bills. And as of 30 seconds ago, we have only received 4 of those bills. This removes the ability, Madam Speaker, of members to hold the government to account and to do our job. And it is an insult to the people of Manitoba by a government that is withholding vital information, Madam Speaker, about schools, about justice, about childcare, and about other matters from the people. As a result, Madam Speaker, I move, seconded by the member from Concordia, that this matter be immediately referred to a committee for consideration.
Before recognizing any other members to speak, I would remind the House that remarks at this time by honourable members are limited to strictly relevant comments about whether the alleged matter of privilege has been raised at the earliest opportunity and whether a prima facie case has been established. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I won't delve into the argument about whether or not this was raised at the earliest possibility. Madam Speaker, I'll let you do your deliberations on whether or not that would be the case, Madam Speaker. On the issue, though, about whether or not this in some way impedes the member's ability to do her job, Madam Speaker, each of the ministers gave a description regarding the bill. I think that you would know that the rules of our House require that bill distribution happens before second reading, Madam Speaker. I've been in this chamber for a brief amount of time, Madam Speaker, since being elected in 2003, and there's been other instances, of course, where similar things have happened. I would remember when Gary Dewar, I believe former Premier Gary Dewar, brought forward legislation on fixed election dates, Madam Speaker. Contained within that bill was, of course, a number of other things, not just set election dates. I believe also the vote tax and other things were contained within the bill, and he delayed distribution of that bill. In fact, I think I remember now Member of Parliament Lamoureux, former MLA in this chamber, running into the hallway and claiming victory on that legislation simply because the bill was entitled the Fixed Election Day Bill, and only later on when the bill was distributed did he see there was a bunch of other things contained within the bill, Madam Speaker. In fact, there may have been matters of privileges or points of order raised on that very issue by former speakers that were then ruled upon. But the real crux, the genesis of this problem, Madam Speaker, as my friend, the Opposition House Leader, will know, is that the opposition has used the relatively new rules that have been crafted in this House to block bills from being introduced before the specified bill deadline date. Madam Speaker, you will know and you will remember that when the relatively new rules were crafted in this House, it was always intended to be a balance and to provide a balance for government to bring in legislation because they have the mandate to govern, but also to allow opposition to do their job and to be able to hold bills over until generally the fall of a particular session so that they could make whatever case they wanted to make to the public that those were not bills that were worthy of support, Madam Speaker. Speaker. However, this opposition, led by this opposition House Leader, has, I would say, used those rules in a way that was never intended by those who crafted them, including former members of the NDP, Steve Ashton, Dave Chomiak, including the member for River Heights, current member for River Heights, who was involved with those rules. And in fact, they have demonstrated both in this spring during a pandemic and in previous springs the desire and the willingness to filibuster the ability for bills to be introduced for days before that specified date. So what we have done as a government is, rather than waiting until spring to provide our intention of the bills that are here now to be introduced, we're doing it months ahead of time, Madam Speaker. So far from the members' ability to be impeded to be able to see legislation or to learn about legislation, she's learned about it from member statements and ministers today who've made comments about it, in fact, months earlier than would have been the case previously. And that is a direct result of how they have managed or decided to at least abuse the intention and the spirit of the rules as were crafted by parties prior to the 2016 election. However, I would offer this in conclusion to my friend, the member for St. John's, Madam Speaker. If she is looking to have the rules change in such a way that it could restore the original intention of those rules so that government can bring forward legislation in a timely way because they have the mandate to govern, and opposition has the ability to withhold or to hold pieces of legislation for longer periods of time because they have also been elected to an important role in democracy, and that is to oppose things that they don't think are in the best interests of the public generally. I have already extended the invitation to the member. I'm more than willing to have a discussion about changing those rules so that it meets both the government's and the opposition's mandates, because we both have important mandates. But on the substance of her matter of privilege, Madam Speaker, this is well within the rules that currently exist in the Manitoba Legislature.
Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Briefly, Madam Speaker, on this matter of privilege. It clearly has been raised at the earliest possible time, and it is a significant issue because we need the bills which have been announced and tabled for first reading to actually be there. The government has had months to prepare these bills and get them ready for distribution, so it's just not acceptable. The House Leader for the government suggests that because the Honourable Gary Doer did this, bad approach in the past, that he should be allowed to do this bad approach now. That's not a good reason. And further, in the comments of the House Leader for the government, he seems to be suggesting that he may not bring these other bills forward for months. This is not normal democracy. This is not the kind of approach that we should have here. The government should be ashamed of itself.
A matter of privilege is a serious concern. I'm going to take this matter under advisement to consult the authorities and will return to the House with a ruling. Petitions. The Honourable Member for Elmwood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Number 1, the provincial government plans to close the Dauphin Correctional Centre, DCCC, in May 2020. Number 2, the DCCC is one of the largest employers in Dauphin, providing the community with good family-supporting jobs. Number 3, approximately 80 families will be directly affected by the closure, which will also impact the local economy. Number 4, as of January 27, 2020, Manitoba's justice system was already more than 250 inmates over capacity. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the Minister of Justice to immediately reverse the decision to close the DCCC and proceed with the previous plan to build a new correctional and healing center with an expanded courthouse in Dauphin, and this has been signed by many, many Manitobans.
In accordance with our Rule 133(6), when petitions are read, they are deemed to be received by the House. Are there any further petitions? There being no further petitions. Grievances. Orders of the day, government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Could you please resolve into Committee of Supply?
The House will now resolve into Committee of Supply to consider estimates from the following departments: Health, Seniors and Active Living in the Chamber, Crown Services in Room 255, and Executive Council in Room 254.
Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates for the Department of Health, Senior and Active Living. Does the Honourable Minister have an opening statement? The Honourable Minister. Can the Minister unmute his mic?
Good afternoon.
We can the Honourable Minister for his opening statement.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Department of Health, Seniors and Active Living, I'm very pleased to present the financial estimates for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. In so doing, I commit to Manitobans that through this budget, we will continue to deliver high-quality health and wellness services in an innovative and sustainable manner to our patients, to our clients, and to our residents. We will continue to deliver safe and accessible services. We will continue to maximize health outcomes for Manitobans at large. Performance in these domains continues to be pursued through the now deployed provincial goals with accompanying performance indicators for which health organizations are now expected to adhere to in their operations. The enhancement of accountability and performance as recommended in the Health Sustainability and Innovation Review ensures performance in key areas including patient experience, access, cost and sustainability, and patient safety in no particular order. Our government has invested over $1 billion between when we took government to now in operations, programs, and services delivered by the department and its other reporting entities, which include the Regional Health Authorities, Cancer Care Manitoba, Addictions Foundation Manitoba, Shared Health, community agencies, and personal care homes. During this same time frame, the Canada Health Transfer increased by $365 million. Historically, the federal government has played an important role in helping to support provincial and territorial health services. However, we continue to be concerned about the reduction on the CHT's annual growth rate and the impact of that to our healthcare system. Starting in 2017-2018, the federal government cut growth in the Canada Health Transfer from a fixed 6% per year to a 3-year moving average of nominal GDP growth, with funding guaranteed to increase by a certain percentage. However, aging population compared with longer life expectancies are expected to result in billions in additional health care costs. And so in December of 2019, Canada's premiers reiterated their call for a stronger healthcare funding partnership with the federal government. The proposed 2020-2021 health budget in core represents the largest investment in healthcare in this province's history, just over $6.3 billion as it resides today. This represents a 1.6% increase in core expenditures compared to the previous year. I would note as well that this printed budget that does not include additional investments to be made in the healthcare sector related to community and home care, to mental health and addictions, as well as funding being set aside to address and respond to the implications of COVID-19. On the topic of the global pandemic, I would mention that our government has proactively budgeted for and set aside amounts in respect of the pressures of COVID-19. The onset of this pandemic represents an exceptional challenge to Manitobans, and therefore an exceptional amount of funds have been earmarked for the healthcare response. I would note that $500 million has been set aside for response and does not even rely or reside in the budget of Health, Seniors and Active Living, and instead resides in an internal service adjustment to which the department can have access. Nature for use of this funding has included some of the following: procurement of the PPE to keep healthcare workers safe, establishment of those COVID visitation shelters to allow residents and visitors, their family members, their caregivers to have contact, even if the pandemic once again forces a shutdown of regular visitation procedures. relief for the one employer, one personal care home effective model that we have in place that is designed to prevent the spread of COVID-19 throughout our long-term care sites. Establishment of the Manitoba Emergency Response Warehouse. Purchase of key equipment, including ventilators and other critical care equipment for our hospitals. Planning for our low acuity overflow sites. Expanded and enhanced inpatient and ICU capacity. Access to COVID-19 testing and contact tracing with additional sites and community-based doctors' offices to make sure that Manitobans can get a test when and where they need it. The redeployment of staff to prioritize case investigations, contact tracing, and notification, and the daily follow-ups of cases and contacts during self-isolation, as well as the new contract with the Canadian Red Cross to increase capacity to support this work. Expanded laboratory testing capacity to meet increased demands. Budget 2020 includes a number of key investments and enhancements in the delivery of healthcare services. I want to take a few moments to describe those. Consistent with other provinces in health spending, we spend approximately 73 cents of every dollar in hospitals and health facilities on salaries and benefits for the workforce and frontline service providers who deliver quality services to Manitobans every day. In Budget 2020, there are continued investments in those resources, including almost $14 million in negotiated wage increases in the health system. Continued and increased investments in global funding in the amount of $12.6 million to the regional health authorities, shared health, cancer care, and the Addictions Foundation of Manitoba. This will be provided collectively to the organizations simply to maintain the levels of existing services amidst increases in the overall size of population and the changes in the mix and demographics of Manitoba's population. Global funding increases include additional investments in personal care homes for wage increases, supplies, and drugs. The cost of providing personal care services is shared with Manitoba Health and by the patients requiring the services. While on the subject of personal care homes, I would like to note that our government is currently working with the regional health authorities to address incremental financial pressures resulting from COVID-19. As the virus continues to add pressure to our healthcare system, we have essentially told the personal care homes, keep your receipts and submit them. We want to make sure that they have that confidence as they are continuing to respond to the global pandemic. Home care services volumes continue to expand. The investments that we are making demonstrate that the system is becoming more efficient as more clients are able to receive care at home with marginal increases. The average number of clients receiving care at home is projected to grow by 2.9% as care is being shifted deliberately and strategically closer to home and away from acute care facilities. Greater investments in the healthcare system to accommodate inflationary increases and other economic increases. That includes $15.2 million in the current year or the upcoming year and spans into a number of key areas, including medical and surgical supplies, lab and diagnostic supplies, and other areas. For the 2020-2021 fiscal year, over $10.6 million in capital operating funding incrementally is being made available in places like the new Women's Hospital, the acute stroke unit that our government has committed to. Cancer Care Manitoba continues to provide provincial services in the diagnosis and treatment of cancer with an operational increase of $1.3 million. Manitoba is also investing additionally in $3.0 million in CAR T-cell therapy to support more patients getting that form of treatment. I would welcome the opportunity to speak further in these estimates proceedings about those investments. But also, of course, remember our investments in support of 60 primary care paramedic positions in Manitoba and new ambulance stations in the province and other investments in paramedicine. There is much more to be said, but for sure, funding to support the increase of activities in STBBI, sexually transmitted and bloodborne infection response. A strong mental health and addiction services system is a core component of our system, and we continue to invest. We're making investments in the area of new RAM clinics to support the findings of the Virgo report and many other areas. I don't have much more time allotted to me. We will have discussions during these estimates, but I do want to thank my department, my deputy minister, my senior staff, the many people at the ADM executive level, and also throughout the department, Shared Health and all our other delivery organizations who work so tirelessly and in such a committed way every day on behalf of all Manitobans. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We thank the Minister. So now we'll go into next stage here. Under the Manitoba practice,
where did he go?
okay, now that the official opposition critic is with not. Okay, we're going to deal with that later with the opening comments of the official critic, opposition critic, and now we'll go on to just go through the routine proceeding here. Under the Manitoba practice, the debate of the Minister of Salary is the last item considered for the Department of the Committee of Supply. Accordingly, we shall now defer consideration line item number 21-1A, contained in Resolution 21-1. At this time, we invite the opposition staff to enter the chamber. So, shall we continue proceeding with the estimates? Does the committee wish to proceed through the estimates of this department chronologically, or have a global discussion? Global discussion, would that also agree with the Minister?
Mr. Chair, seeking a clarification.
Okay, the Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, we are seeking a clarification as to why the opposition critic is not making an opening statement.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Miigwech, Chairperson. Just for the purposes of the Minister's information and just to clarify, the critic for health, the member for Union Station, is presently doing media and is actually waiting for the Minister of Education just to finish up, and then they are next, and then they will be here. So that's why we're just asking if we can just postpone and come back to their opening comments.
So now,
Mr. Chair, seeking a response.
The Honourable Minister again? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Seeking to respond to that information?
Yep, the Honourable Minister on the response.
Are you seeking agreement to have us revert at some point in these proceedings to accommodate the critic? Because I assumed that when we were starting, that was because you had both the Minister and the opposition critic in their seats, and that's why we were commencing these proceedings.
Okay, I just have to remind the Minister that we can't make sure that if a person's not in the chamber, we can't identify that. But now we got the official opposition critic.
I think we might be ready to deal with the
opening
statement of the opposition.
We can probably deal with the opening statement of the opposition critic. The Honourable Member for Union Station on the 10 minutes opening statement.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the staff, the clerks, everyone here at the Legislature for their ongoing efforts to keep us safe and to ensure that we can participate, in our democratic duties safely and responsibly. So, big thank you to everyone who continue to make these efforts. I'd like to start by acknowledging that, COVID-19 is challenging governments absolutely across the globe, and it's laying bare the flaws, the inequities, and injustices in our society and in our healthcare system. And in the days that we have here in estimates, these proceedings, they'll show, and they'll lay out clearly how the cuts made by the Palliser government to our healthcare system left us vulnerable, left us weakened in the system, and ultimately ill prepared for the COVID-19 crisis. The rushed consolidation of emergency rooms in Winnipeg cut capacity in our healthcare system. Capacity that we need now was undermined, and we're seeing how desperately right now we need that capacity within our healthcare system. And when we look back at this time, when Manitobans look back at this time, they'll ask themselves, did their government do everything that they could to prepare themselves? Did their government do everything that they could to mitigate this disaster, this pandemic, once it arrived here in Manitoba? And they'll ask, did their government show the leadership needed to lead Manitobans through this unprecedented, challenging time? And in all regards, the answer is no. Was the Palliser government prepared? Certainly not. We saw right near the beginning that they were forced to beg industry for personal protective equipment. And though the minister has never accounted for this, it is clear, I think, to any rational observer, including the editorial board of the Winnipeg Free Press, that the Palliser government was not prepared with enough PPE for a pandemic. And after failing in those preparations, what has the Palliser government done? Have they done everything they can to mitigate this disaster? And again, no. As of last week, there were less intensive care beds in Winnipeg than there were in 2017, and we are 8 months into this pandemic. Did the Palliser government show adequate leadership? Again, unfortunately, no. The Palliser government's response included spending hundreds of thousands of dollars urging to restart Manitoba when they should have been urging continued preparation and caution. And the minister himself refers to anti-maskers as people who are making good points. And so I would say that history is going to remember these times, and people will remember how this government failed to prepare, failed to respond, and ultimately failed to lead. Now, unfortunately, I wish I could tell this House that COVID-19 was the only challenge facing our health system, but it's not the case. There are several other very serious issues that we face. The Palliser government cut access to cancer care facilities at Seven Oaks and Concordia hospitals after promising they would make no cuts to access. When we talk about protecting Manitobans and making accessible what is needed for vulnerable Manitobans, I think that flies in the face of that, just as one example. And by all accounts, home care in this province is falling apart, with declining levels of service and the staff who provide those supports. I know I hear from constituents in Union Station on a regular basis, several times a week, about their challenges receiving adequate care through home care. The abrupt reduction, significant reduction to home care has so detrimentally impacted so many Manitobans. I've written multiple letters to the minister on this issue. I know that families of loved ones who receive home care have done the same. I know that folks receiving home care have done the same. I also think about healthcare in rural regions and the incredibly significant challenges that they're facing. The minister closed the Roblin emergency room, and places like Dauphin have nurse vacancy rates of over 20%. Over 20%. And we have no indication as to how this is going to be addressed. We have no indication as to a plan to make sure that rural health care is being bolstered, that public health care in rural communities is being supported and bolstered. not just during this pandemic, but certainly beyond this pandemic, looking forward into what healthcare rurally can look like in Manitoba. In addition to the questions that I will be asking throughout these proceedings, my colleague for Point Douglas will spend time inquiring of the governments regarding the very serious addiction crisis that we face in this province, the very serious crisis of problematic substance use, of unaddressed childhood trauma, of overdoses. And I commend my colleague for her persistence in asking these questions in QP, for her persistence in asking these questions of the government, amplifying the voices of families and communities that are fighting every single day to make sure that their loved ones who are struggling with problematic substance use and addictions have access to the resources they deserve, the health care that they deserve. And my colleague will also spend time inquiring of this government regarding the news we heard last week of 30 babies being born in Manitoba this year with congenital syphilis. This province, Manitoba, is on track this year to have the same number of cases of congenital syphilis as the entire country did last year. That is devastating. Something that is entirely preventable, that we should see zero. That number should simply be zero in 2020. 30 cases so far this year. It is an absolute failure on the part of this government that Manitoba could reach record numbers of congenital syphilis that measure what is typically seen across the country. And so again, I also want to take this opportunity to thank the folks who continue to bring their concerns forward to us as legislators, the people who bravely voice their concerns about what's going on in our communities, in our healthcare system, nurses, doctors, healthcare aides, environmental workers, people with loved ones in long-term care, who let us know, who shine a light on what's going on in our healthcare system in a way that, quite frankly, due to this government's lack of transparency, we wouldn't have as clear an idea had it not been or be for the amazing generosity of Manitobans who share with us what's actually going on the ground, in their work environments, in their workplaces, in the spaces that they're navigating in the healthcare system. And I also want to make sure that every opportunity that we have, we thank our essential workers and healthcare workers for all of their efforts during this pandemic. We are on side, we are fighting for them, and we're asking these questions because it allows for the government, quite frankly, to reflect on their decision making and make better decisions moving forward that will help our healthcare system generate the capacity it needs to get through this pandemic and certainly move us in a direction with a more equitable and better, stronger performing healthcare system overall. And lastly, again, I'll keep doing this because we have to, it's important. I want to thank all the staff, all of the health staff, all the department staff, all the staff who are supporting today's proceedings under what are very challenging, unprecedented times.
We thank the critic of the official opposition for those remarks. We'll just go back again to under the Manitoba practice debate of the minister's salary is the last item considered for the department in the Committee of Supply. Accordingly, we shall now defer consideration of line item 21.1A contained in resolution 21.1. At this time, I invite opposition staff to enter the chamber if there is any staff attending. No? Okay. And does the committee wish to proceed through the estimates of this department chronologically or have a global discussion? Global? Is that also the case with the minister too? I don't know if the minister has his mic on mute.
I concur.
Concur? Okay. Well, now we'll have the discussion in a global discussion. And I agree that the questioning for the department will be in a global manner and with all resolutions to be passed once the question has concluded. The floor is now open for questions. The honourable member for Union Station.
I'd like to start by asking the minister some questions around our PPE stockpile. Our Manitoba's PPE stockpile in 2009, listed as part of post H1N1 accountability, stated that there was over and above normal supplies for PPE. And so I think about the fact that in 2017, the province was making a lot of cuts, including what looked like to be a cut to even incontinence products and pads for new mothers, which just seems very cold and callous. But I'm wondering if the minister could identify now how many N95 respirators do you have access to, including those on hand as well as stockpiled?
The Honourable Minister of Health, Senior and Active Living.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm seeking some advice here. So if we were conventionally in the same room, I would now have the opportunity to confer with my officials. So with your support, I will put my mic in mute to confer with my officials and then signal my readiness to answer when I put my mic back on. Is that sufficient?
That'll be sufficient, yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am happy to talk about PPE and welcome the question by the member in respect of our province's planning for appropriate PPE to combat COVID-19 in this global pandemic. I would want to, though, reflect also on the fact that the opposition critic made the comments in the opening statement to somehow suggest that a global collapse of PPE, including N95, a complete wiping away of conventional supply chains, was somehow foreseeable. And so, Mr. Chair, I have to remark that I have sat at tables for the last 9 months with the Federal Minister of Health, Patty Haydu. I have sat with all of my counterparts in the provinces and territories. We have had countless hours where we as ministers, provincial, federal, and territorial, have combined our efforts. We have thought outside of the box. We have gone to some very exceptional places to import PPE to jurisdiction, as has much of the world. And I can say for the critic and for all those who are taking in today's proceedings that we owe an incredible debt of gratitude to the people who have led on this front line, people in health, people like Jay Singh, people in central services, people like Deputy Minister Scott Sinclair and others in his shop, people who saw the incredible challenge of procuring PPE. As a matter of fact, I heard the federal Minister for Foreign Affairs reflect that it had become the Wild West when it came to N95 procurement, finding supply chains. So I would ask the critic to reflect on the fact that the entire world was covering a global shortage in PPE. Nevertheless, we say thank you to not only those who led the charge in Manitoba, not only those who in Manitoba recognized the need for an inventory management tool that would be able to help us assess the need for, find those companies that could provide us with the materials, know how to warehouse it, know how to distribute it, then know how to secure it on site, and then know how to use the personnel to see for its appropriate usage and distribution through to the hospital ward level. And I can tell all Manitobans that that information and that system now is in place. It is one of the success stories of this government's response that we have in place now an inventory demand system that will go on serving Manitobans in perpetuity long after COVID-19. We came in some cases within days of burning through our personal protective equipment in this process. There was at one time the development of a doctrine that would see for universal continuous personal protective equipment by all users across the full spectrum of the healthcare system, and then including justice and including education and including child and family services and daycares. And we would have exhausted all of our PPE within days had we gone in the direction where the advice had pointed. Instead, we redoubled our efforts. We undertook to establish tables to understand our projections. I was pleased to have the support and participation of Shared Health, the Manitoba Nurses Union, to continue to give us advice and cooperation when it comes to understanding our needs. And we came to an understanding that we needed to conserve our PPE in order to make it available to where it would be most necessary in the system. And what that did is it allowed us time that we bought in order to help us stabilize the inventory. There are 143 N95 masks now.
The Honourable Minister's time is up.
Days.
The Honourable Member for Union Station under question.
Thank you. What was stockpiled in the event of a pandemic? So how many N95 respirators were set aside prior to the pandemic?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Minister of Health, Seniors and Active Living.
Thank you. I needed the refresher. I'm sorry I got cut off in the last remark because I remember now that the clock starts at 5 minutes, so I see it displayed there. I will endeavor to remain within my allotted time. What I was attempting to say as my time closed out is that we have currently 143 days of standard N95 masks. We also have another 54 days of small format N95 masks in jurisdiction. In addition to that, we have, as reported by Central Services, a large inventory of reusable N95 masks. As Manitobans will know, we also worked hard in this global pandemic in the early days to collect used N95s for reprocessing as the reprocessing capacity has gotten better and better. And I should indicate to everyone that we have continued to work with our partners and external groups with expertise to understand what our capability is to reuse N95s that can be adequately sterilized. And so the work continues there. I would also tell the critic, in response to the question, that, for example, Manitoba went from being a jurisdiction that was working with 60 conventional suppliers for PPE to almost overnight flexing up to work with 600 plus suppliers of PPE. You can only imagine the extraordinary efforts undertaken by those Manitobans leading the charge on this. In areas where they had to engage with new suppliers, work from a known supplier to a new one, both domestically and externally offshore, in Eastern Asia, in continental Europe, in South America. Heroic efforts made to be able to source the materials we needed. Nitrile gloves were in very short supply in the early days of the pandemic. Medical gowns, N95 masks, surgical masks, routine masks. So we had many pieces of equipment that we brought in. To the member's question, I would say this. What we did not do in Manitoba is expire $55 million of masks and PPE supplies as Ontario did. The member and all members will require that after the SARS epidemic in Ontario,
you were faded out there for a minute there, so
thank you. A former government in Ontario ordered the stockpiling of $55 million of PPE, but failed to produce a plan by which those supplies would actually routinely work through the receipt of inventory and then out to distribution and usage. As a result, $55 million of supplies were expired. We similarly found as an incoming government that there was no infrastructure in place left by the previous NDP government for such a warehousing for emergency stockpile. And I am pleased to indicate to all members and to all Manitobans that we have essentially constituted that capability that did not hitherto exist. We have, going forward in Manitoba, that ability. We are building an emergency warehouse with redundancy, with multiple locations, $1 million of inventory that will be there not only to assist us now on COVID-19, but also going forward. I would remind the member that while they and the members of the opposition were filibustering this House and day after day ringing the bells and refusing to allow the legislature to go about its business, those were the days when our health system leaders and government members and ministers were working every single day to secure the PPE that we need for this pandemic response. So I'm pleased to say we are in a much better situation now, not only for COVID-19, but also going forward with the establishment of Manitoba's first emergency warehouse for stockpiling and inventory management.
The honourable member for Union Station.
Can the minister please provide, he provided the day's worth of N95s in three different categories of N95s, but can the minister please tell us what does that mean in real numbers? So how many actual masks do those days translate to in terms of the 143 that he mentioned, the 54 days, and the large storage of reusable N95s? What does that mean in terms of real numbers of actual masks? And how many of each of those N95s are used per day, or are gone through per day?
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be remiss as well if I did not take this opportunity to indicate that enormous response was received in Manitoba by business, by industry, by groups, and by private citizens who wanted to help. We believe that in many respects, the best of what it means to be a Manitoban came through when it came to our response on PPE. And I was actually just reflecting that I received a briefing on April the 8th, which seems like a lifetime ago now. But at the time, Shared Health officials were telling me that they had received one more shipment of supply, which would allow us to extend another 4.5 days. And when you think about, in some cases, when you talk about certain articles of PPE, we now have thousands of days of supply, or hundreds of days of supply at current established burn rates through appropriate usage through the system, monitored as it is by various groups with their responsibility to do so. But it's amazing to think how at times extending by 4 days was a significant achievement. Such was the fragility of supply, not just in Manitoba, but across all Canadian jurisdictions and across much of the world. But I would be remiss if I did not herald the efforts of those businesses and industries. And I know that if I name some, I will be at risk of forgetting others. But I think about the companies and the third parties, the universities who came on side, provided materials. We had Hutterite colonies undertaking to sew cloth masks. We had companies like Diesel in the city of Morden, Manitoba, who were undertaking to sew gowns for healthcare workers. We had companies like Icon Plastics and Technologies who were making the face masks for use in our hospitals. We had other suppliers of those. We had companies sewing gowns from across the world and right here in our own city. I think about Mondetta Manufacturing that used its global supply chains to be able to sew and then import through their distribution backbone of the supplies that we would need. And so we say thank you to all of those groups who are part of our Made in Manitoba solution. The member is asking a question about how many masks? And that is one question to answer. But the other question to clearly understand is the framework for decision making when it comes to Manitoba's supply management and stewardship planning and guidance. So when it comes to PPE, we know now that we've activated this supply management and stewardship framework. And that involves communicating to our healthcare workers the appropriate use of PPE. It involves central control of PPE supply, because it would not be accurate to say that we didn't also face shortages that were a result of people removing supply in an inappropriate way from warehouse. But also we spoke about conservation of PPE and how to not burn through at a rate that would be greater than your peer down the hall. We talked about allocation of PPE to the areas of highest risk and to the workers providing the most critical care services, and also continuous monitoring and auditing of supply and usage. And so I'm proud to say that all of those protocols are now in place in the province of Manitoba. It continues to be the case that we have undertaken through infection prevention and control and occupational and environmental health and clinical leaders to establish that guidance that assures that not only are we continuing to bring in the supply we need, but that we are also then using it to the maximum efficiency. I'm just seeing here whether there's an update to be provided in respect of how many units that would mean when it comes to N95. If not, then we will continue to try to provide that answer as the afternoon proceeds. I could speak about where we have made N95 masks appropriate for aerosol generating activities, and then try to focus those supplies in those areas. But I'd be happy to speak further about how we're allocating and how we're evaluating usage on an ongoing basis.
The honourable member for Union Station.
Thank you. Can the minister provide some clarity? I'm gonna be asking the minister to provide some clarity rather on the access to PPE. Media has certainly reported that there's a lack of access to personal protective equipment. Recently reported that 55 facilities were slapped with grievances over masks, and the Premier actually said on Wednesday a shortage of PPE in Manitoba is a result in part by a failure at the federal government level to provide early support in the province. Those are his words. So I'm wondering if the minister can provide some clarity around why healthcare workers, including home care workers, folks who are working with some of the most vulnerable demographics, aged population, folks with disabilities, why are they not always insured to have N95 masks when working with someone with COVID-19? And that's been well reported, like I said, throughout media and certainly from home care workers directly. So why aren't healthcare workers, including home care, always ensured that they have N95s when working with somebody who has COVID-19?
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I answer the member's question, I wanted to preamble by having members reflect that it was only March the 10th of this year when all the members of the House gave their agreement to a supplementary funding appropriation for the purchase of $35.2 million that would allow Manitoba to participate in the federal government's PPE initiative. And members will remember that subsequent to that day, that $35.2 million of PPE did not arrive in our jurisdiction. We voted the authority. We had the debate that day. All members of the legislature put their agreement to that funding. It shows the extent to which our government was the head of the pack when it came to leading on the need to take decisive action to get the PPE we need. Nevertheless, and unfortunately at that time, there was no receipt of that promised PPE. There were decisions that were complex that went into reassigning that supply to other provinces who were at a different place. Manitoba, of course, recognized its need to be a good neighbor. We saw the increase of the spread in Eastern Canada. We were taking precautions ourselves. Nevertheless, it shows the degree to which there was volatility on supply, that the promised order into our jurisdiction by the federal government never materialized. To the member's question about who makes the decisions on PPE allocation, I want to make crystal clear. It is not the minister in room 302 of the Manitoba Legislature who indicates to healthcare workers on the front line where and when those supplies are utilized. Instead, far more effective is the joint PPE committee that we have established. It has membership from clinical leadership across our healthcare system, the regional health authorities, Cancer Care Manitoba, Shared Health, the Department of Health, but also the Manitoba Nurses Union. And this gives us, with that established membership, the ability to provide guidance in the use of medical masks. At that table, there can be discussion about what is the relative risk of the activity. We talk about how to conserve that PPE, including N95s, for the most critical activities within our healthcare system. It talks about how to conserve those things, and then also where there are anomalies, those can be raised by MNU from their members. So you have that ability to escalate issues of concern around the specific application of PPE to the right table of decision makers. But also, I would also say to the member in response to the question that, as I said previously, we have in place now, which was not in place under the NDP, this much more evolved system to be able to conserve PPE supply in a pandemic situation for higher risk settings and services. So we know that there is no substitute for meticulous hand hygiene. That should be performed in all cases. We know that that is appropriate in non-COVID patients as well. But we also know that there's guidance that is given through the system when it comes to staff who are delivering supplies or food or pharmaceuticals who are not COVID positive. We know that the safe and extended use of PPE is articulated and talked about where it's appropriate, as identified in the provincial personal protective equipment requirements. There's a document that helps ensure that critical services are supported during this COVID-19 period when PPE supply is limited. And let's be clear, I was speaking to the Federal Minister of Health just yesterday in a meeting about the need for further receipt of N95 masks in Manitoba. I've indicated to the minister that on the basis of Manitoba's elevated spread right now of COVID-19, it is important that we have access to the N95 masks. And so the member and all members will be comforted to know that our advocacy efforts, even to the federal government, continue even at this time to ensure we have the right equipment, including the 2 million masks that we currently have in supply.
The Honourable Minister's time is up. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Thank you. The Minister stated previously that he would undertake to provide the real numbers of the different categories of N95 that are available, and as well the daily burn rate. And so I would ask if the Minister could ensure we have those numbers by tomorrow, that undertaking. And my question, specific question right now is, when were we days away from running out of N95s? At what point were we just days away from running out of N95 masks?
Mr. Chair?
The Honourable Minister.
I did provide the number that we currently have on hand of the N95 masks. The member needs to be more clear as to the question that they are asking. If the member is asking about the burn rate, then it's important to understand that burn rates oscillate on a wide variety of factors, according to who is in a hospital and what that rate of admissions is, but who is also in a hospital in critical care, who's in acute care, to what extent our surgery program is being used, where else in the system activities are taking place. As the member knows, the health system is a very broad, very complex, $6 billion organization with thousands and thousands of workers. And that calculus of burn rate is actually assisted by software that helps us. So it would really depend. I think we will need the member to clarify what type of scenario they're seeking. But clearly, when it comes to a system as complex as ours, that burn rate changes. I believe the member misunderstood a previous answer that I gave. I indicated 4.5 as being the number of days in some supply that would have been extended in the month of April due to the receipt of a new shipment. I was using that to illustrate how tenuous the global supply. The global supply of PPE was at that time. I did not indicate that at any point in time we were 4.5 days being out of PPE. What I would clarify and say is that, of course, the global supply was under great strain. Conventional supply chains were drying up. Governments, all senior governments, were going to exceptional measures to be able to source and receive the supplies they need for their frontline workers. We pulled out the stops because we needed to create safety for all of our healthcare workers and the patients and the clients that they serve, and that is why we undertook that activity. So I welcome this line of questioning because I will endeavor to bring back for these proceedings as well and be able to quantify for this member. The member seems to be in doubt that somehow that the headlines they were reading in April and May were in fact real. And I can assure that member that that was not fake news. That when it comes to all of those headlines, Globe and Mail, National Post, even our Winnipeg Free Press, the Winnipeg Sun, New York Times, all of these stories on the strain that global procurement chains were under was very real, as reported by all of my colleagues, as reported at the Deputy Minister's Table for Health, as reported back by the Special Advisory Committee for COVID-19, by all the chief provincial public health officers and the territorial officers, and by the federal chief public health officer, but also as reported as at the deputy's table for central services and procurement. Those things were very real, and I would welcome further treatment of that subject at this table. But I would also indicate, just to reflect back at March the 10th, there was that press release that was indicating that we had all signed or we had all voted to support this appropriate planning, preparation, mitigation, and response to the evolving COVID-19 situation. I was pleased that we had on that day the broad collaboration of all the parties in the Manitoba Legislature, that we were able to do that with unanimity. And on that day, all parties, including the NDP, spoke to the global shortages. So if the member is reflecting today on whether those global shortages were real, they should check back in Hansard and review the statements of their own colleagues before they go much further to understand the degree to which those attestations of the global fragility of the supply chain were made by members on all sides of the House. I'm quoting from that press release on that day and say current inventory of PPE supply is being closely monitored, and regions and sites have been asked to take steps to ensure supply of PPE. And then we were saying we were doing that in order to, and I'm quoting again, to help ensure patients, staff, and frontline workers have appropriate protective equipment at a competitive price. And then it goes on to say how we are working in collaboration with the federal government and with federal procurement in order that we're all singing from the same song sheet. So I wanted to provide that additional detail. It seems like a long time back, but as we reflect back, it simply serves to underscore that a lot's been done.
The Honourable Minister's time is up. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Thank you. I was very clear that I'm seeking the real numbers of the categories of N95 that the Minister outlined. Very clear about that. The Minister stated that they would endeavour to provide that data, that information, and so I'm simply requesting that the Minister provide that information tomorrow if possible. Again, that's the real numbers in regards to the N95s that the Minister stated we had 143 days worth of, the ones that he said we had 54 days worth of, and the large storage of reusable N95 masks. If the Minister could provide the real numbers of what exists in those categories currently, if that could be provided tomorrow, that would be wonderful. And specific to how we're burning through equipment, I I was seeking clarification around a statement the minister made today, not long ago, in these proceedings. He said that we came within days, this is a quote, we came within days of burning our personal protective equipment. I'm asking the minister to clarify, please, when that period of time was. When was it that they came within days of burning our personal protective equipment? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I seem to have lost my video, but I'm going to go on the assumption that I've still got audio and that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first, I have to say I'm not certain what the direction of the member's question is, attempting to re-arbitrate a widely accepted view of the world that we had challenged every senior government in the Western world and most elsewhere in securing the PPE that we needed to in advance of the pandemic. I've made it clear to the member that we inherited a system in our 5 years of government whereby it became clear that our predecessors, even though they were in power for 17 years, had not undertaken to establish an emergency stockpile. And even if Ontario got it wrong, at least Ontario was trying. And even at that time after SARS, it is obvious that the NDP did nothing to direct the system to strengthen its reserves in respect of PPE. So while I am perplexed that this is the direction that the member wants to pursue in these proceedings, that's fine. We will go there. The member is asking for a breakdown of the individual itemized N95s. I've already provided the global number of 2 million. I could be more specific and indicate it's 2,047,370 N95 masks. We will endeavor to provide a breakdown of that, and I'll commit to get back to them when we can with the necessary information, inclusive of those reusable N95 masks, inclusive of the discarded single N95 masks that we understand really at this point in time are not re-entering use, but are still in storage under the understanding that there may still be a leap forward in the ability to sterilize these and use them should the circumstances require them. I was reflecting just a moment ago on a statement that was made on April the 7th by one of our senior officers in charge of procurement in Shared Health. And on April the 7th, this individual had indicated that our inventory management and monitoring is getting better day after day. So it's good to know that even back then there was that assessment of our system. Did it get tenuous at times? Absolutely. It was tenuous at times. In Manitoba, in Saskatchewan, in Alberta, in BC. Why? Because I spoke to all of those ministers. In Quebec, in Nova Scotia. Why? Do we know? Because I spoke to all those ministers. But to the member's question, members asking for a snapshot. When did it get thin? When it came to procurement in the province? Well, it's difficult to know what the member's asking for, which day the member's asking for. It's difficult to know how best to answer the question, but let me try. And I'm sorry, with the video gone, I also don't see the time. So, Mr. Chair, can you remind me of the time that's elapsed?
Right now, you have 1 minute and 20 seconds left.
Very good. On March the 20th of 2020, the province had on hand 1,158,000 nitrile gloves. We had on hand on the same date 25,000 face shields. We had on hand 675,000 N95 respirators. We had on hand on that day 33,152,000 surgical masks. We had on hand on that day 120,000 gallons of various types, 52,000 bottles of hand sanitizer, 31,000 hand sanitizer foam soaps, 103,000 wipes, 15,200 thermometers, and 337,000 Ziploc bags. And I hope that helps to answer the member's question about what inventory we had on hand at any one time. I would tell you, globally, for each of those categories, it's greater now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member for Union Station.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the minister can provide a little bit of clarity. The minister has already spoken to the fact that he's in communication with the Joint PPE Committee. He's identified the persons and the organizations, the entities that are serving on that committee and participating on that committee, which is a good thing. And in thinking about healthcare workers who are in hospital working on the front lines during this pandemic, and certainly now as we see healthcare workers unfortunately contracting COVID and falling sick, having to isolate, we're hearing from folks working in hospital that do receive N95s, but they're saying that they are being provided only one N95 per day, one N95 mask per day. And that means that they are, after removing the mask, and I think in some folks they're being provided a paper bag to put that mask in, it means that they at some point are putting that potentially contaminated mask back on after a lunch break or using a restroom. So given the fact that the minister, and I know the minister, like I would imagine all members of this House, certainly want our healthcare workers to be safe, to be as safe as possible, that as we see COVID outbreaks happening in our hospitals and facilities, we want to make sure that people are more protected, not less, that they have access to the PPE they need in order to keep themselves safe. So, and given the communication the minister is having with this committee, I'm wondering if he can shed some light on why healthcare workers are only being given one N95 mask per day to wear when they're in such high-risk situations.
Mr. Chair, just on logistics.
Yes, the Honourable Minister.
Yes, just a logistical question, and I recognize that everyone's working very hard to be able to accommodate this committee of supply in a very unusual, fashion. So kudos to everyone who's assisting us in the background to make these proceedings virtual in order to keep all Manitobans participating safe. Thank you very much. I have lost my video feed, so with your permission, Mr. Chair, I will remain on audio, but I'm going to stop my video because I don't know if I'm being seen but simply cannot see anyone else, including control room, speaker, and other participants. Could you give me some guidance on that question,
Minister,
Mr. Chair?
We just see you, actually. So if you want to continue, we're seeing you perfectly. Just yourself in the room.
Okay, so I'm on video?
Yes, you're on video.
Okay, I don't have any video feed myself.
That seems to be a problem. Yeah, it's probably, we're seeing here that it's a problem on your end, not on this end. We can see you perfectly, we can hear you.
Okay. Advice for me, do you want me to continue to keep my video controls on?
Yeah, if you don't mind, if you can keep your video, it's working perfectly on this end.
And then tell him one of our staff.
One of the staff will go up and assist you after we're finished assessments today. Okay?
Thank you. We had video until recently, and then it just escaped us. We'll keep the video on. Give me one moment to confer with my officials, and then I'll respond.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Okay, so I would want to make clear to the member that the member is saying we are hearing from people, and that's a refrain we often hear from this member. We are hearing from people. I'm asking for some clarification of that statement. Could the member indicate whether the member is hearing a broad theme from a significant number of healthcare workers that despite efforts to alert their supervisors and to work through to the committee that's responsible for that appropriate use of PPE in our hospitals, that somehow they're not being accommodated? Or is this anecdotal? Could the member provide some details about how many people they have heard from? Because I can tell all members that when it comes to occupational safety and health, infection prevention and control, the regional health authorities, under the leadership of the Chief Integration Lead and the Chief Nursing Officer, this is not a theme that is coming out that somehow we have broad array of workers who are not able to get the PPE that they need. We are ensuring that this committee works exactly to do that, to make sure that there is that appropriate conservation and use and the prioritization of the PPE for the activities that are most essential and that need it the most. So that's exactly the kind of work that is undertaken, not at the minister's office, but instead at the committee level, as I said, where MNU has standing and that ability to also raise issues and concerns. We believe that process is working. We believe that process is considerable in its ability to receive.
The hour being
messages.
5 p.m., the committee rise, call on the Speaker.
The hour being 5 p.m., the House is adjourned and stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.